Well, hello and happy Monday. If Monday is happy, I've always kind of, I'd say over the last 10 or 15 years, started to really love Mondays. I know that sounds weird. Most people hate them, but I've learned to embrace it because it's inevitable. And here's the thing if you wake up, you're still alive. So that's a good thing. So maybe embrace Mondays. I guess it's all about focusing. Maybe I'll talk about that later on the ASMR show. I am here to talk to you today about, a federal government program that's changed a little bit from what the initial program was supposed to be. And once again, in keeping with human interest stories that often have a political bent, because this is a political show after all, I thought I'd focus on something the federal government had come up with, and it looks like now things are changing a little bit. Now, I briefly read about this earlier today. I didn't have time to get into it. I had to work a little bit later than normal, and as soon as I got home, I had to take Lola out, and now she's sitting at my feet chewing on a bone. So, without any further ado, I'm just going to get right into the story. This is from the CBC, written by Olivia Stefanovic. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. And it's under the politics category because it's political. But it is a human interest story at the end of the day because it's about human rights. Ottawa First Nations prepare competing child welfare reform plans. Human Rights Tribunal set December 22nd, that's today, as deadline for long-term proposals. Interesting. This was posted on December 6th originally. Ottawa is staring down a court-ordered deadline to submit a new plan to reform the on-reserve child welfare system as a group of First Nation leaders and children's advocates prepare a competing proposal. The federal government has until today, December 22nd, to make its submission to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal after the Assembly of First Nations rejected the previous Liberal government's $47.8 billion long-term reform offer last year. Our approach to child welfare will be First Nations-led and community-led, and it will be supported by significant additional funding, Prime Minister Mark Carney said during a speech at the AFN Special Chiefs Assembly last Tuesday in Ottawa. The government's plan will be compared against one from a First Nations-led group known as National Children's Chiefs Commission. The First Nations leaders and children's advocates who make up that group say they don't trust Ottawa to end discrimination in the on-reserve child welfare system. They want the tribunal to use the Commission's plan to ensure the reforms are done for their children on their terms. Lola, what were you eating? Oh, it was her tennis ball. My apologies. Sorry, I thought it was a bone. She was chewing on her tennis ball. Sorry for the interruption, folks. My baby girl takes precedence over everything in my life. There you go, Lola. My apologies. First Nations leaders and children's advocates who make up that group say they don't trust Ottawa to end discrimination in the on-reserve child welfare system. They want the tribunal to use the Commission's plan to ensure the reforms are done for their children on their terms. Sorry. It is my hope and my dream, and I think the dream of all of our children, that they would choose the model that is the best model that incorporates cultural integrity, humility. That seems to be a brokenness. Cultural integrity, humility, said Pauline Frost, chair of the commission, and chief of the Vuntut Gwich'in First Nation in the Yukon. It will be a model that is designed by the Indigenous people for the Indigenous people. Strange way to write that. I would have put that afterwards. Why did you interrupt the sentence? Very strange. Sorry, my ADHD brain is not handling this very well. I'm going to read this how I would have written it. I read it how it was originally written, but I'm going to read it the way it should be written. It is my hope and my dream, and I think the dream of all of our children, that they would choose the model that is the best model that incorporates cultural integrity and humility. It will be a model that is designed by the Indigenous people for the Indigenous people, said Pauline Frost, chair of the commission and chief of the Vuntut Gwich'in First Nation in the Yukon. I really hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I did not. Not just about dollar figures. The dual plans are being crafted nearly 10 years after the tribunal issued a landmark ruling that found Ottawa racially discriminated against First Nations children by underfunding First Nations child and family services and ordered an end to the discrimination. Well, none of us are surprised by that. Anybody who watches this program, who is a member of the Beaver Lodge, knows that this is not a shock to us. This does not come as a surprise. It was systemic racism practiced by governments for decades. This is not new. The proposals also come almost 20 years following a joint human rights complaint made by the AFN and the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society in 2007. The Caring Society's executive director, Cindy Blackstock, said the commission is looking to secure long-term funding close to $50 billion. Blackstock said the money is subject to annual reviews and must be guaranteed for more than 10 years, one of the key components missing from the package presented by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It's not just the amount of money, it's the security of the money, Blackstock said. It's how the money gets spent so that it has maximum input outcomes. Indigenous Services Minister wants to bridge. Try that again. Indigenous Services Minister wants to bridge gap. The commission was directed to do the work by the AFN's chiefs in assembly. It's compiling perspectives from each AFN region to prepare its framework separately from Ottawa. It's all been, we're going to ignore you and we're going to litigate against you, Blackstock said about the government's approach. I'm hoping with the Prime Minister's commitment that the direction will change. It's unclear if the funding that Carney pledged will be more or less than the $47.8 billion Trudeau offered over 10 years. Indigenous Services Minister Many Galmasti would not confirm how much money the government is considering, but she did say she's trying to bridge the gap between the government and the commission and possibly create a hybrid plan. Every day that we spend discussing the technicalities of an agreement is another day that a child is in care, and that is something that is important to me that we address, Galmasti said. We have to collaborate. When Galmasti's comments were put to the head of the commission, Frost said they're always looking for collaboration, but she does not think they can merge strategies. At this point, it's not possible, Frost said. Not my area of expertise, obviously, and I don't fully understand everything or all the players involved, so it's not fair of me to try and even make a comment on this. And I'm not going to, because I don't feel I'm qualified to do it. I don't have the experience, the knowledge, the expertise, and hello, look at me. I'm as white as the day is long. It's not my area. So instead, I will just try and relay this information to you. Now, one of the stories I highlighted in just a moment ago that I read to you was on reserve child welfare system receives up to 38% less funding than elsewhere. The story was dated January 26th, 2016, updated August 2nd, 2016. A human rights tribunal ruled that Ottawa knowingly discriminates tens of thousands of children on reserves by underfunding welfare. Wow. The federal government discriminates against First Nation children on reserves by failing to provide the same level of child welfare services that exist elsewhere, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal has ruled. Cindy Blackstock, Executive Director of the First Nations and Family Caring Society, along with the Assembly of First Nations, filed a complaint against Ottawa with the Canadian Human Rights Commission in February 2007. So it took 9 years to make a decision. And we're almost 10 years since then, and nothing has still been done. They agreed the support the federal government provides for child welfare on reserves is much lower than the support provincial governments give to children off reserves. Even though on-reserve needs are greater, less funding for family support means more children end up in the child welfare system, they said. And here's a direct quote from Cindy Blackstock, who, as many of you know, we've been trying to get on this program for a while, but she's a very busy woman. Why did we have to bring the government of Canada to court to get them to treat First Nation children fairly? Yeah, that's another embarrassing mark against our government, all governments, over the last, 200 years? All Canadian governments. It didn't matter what party was in power. They didn't do it right. 2007, this was launched. It's about to be 2026. And the decision is due today, December 22nd, 2025. Canadian Human Rights Tribunal agreed according to a decision published Tuesday morning, and this is in 2016, January 26, 2016, that says the federal government's funding model and management of its First Nations child and family services resulted in denials of services and created various adverse impacts for many First Nations children and families living on reserves. Now, I'm going to go out there on a limb and say there's probably a little bit of racism involved. You think? But here's the thing. The federal government is not supposed to discriminate in that manner, ever. They are supposed to serve all Canadians equally. Doesn't matter what your party is, doesn't matter who you voted for. The government is there to serve all Canadians equally. That's it. That's all. Which is why we need to get rid of the CPC, because they will only bend over for their people and screw over the rest of us. Much like how Trump has been vindictive with anybody who didn't vote Republican or support his minions and party. Pierre Poilievre would be no damn different. He'd be a vindictive little prick because that's who he is. Sorry, I know this is a human interest story, but there is politics at the heart of the matter of it. The decision says the government must cease the discriminatory practice and take measures to redress and prevent it. It calls for the redesign of the child welfare system and its funding model, urging the use of experts to ensure First Nations are given culturally appropriate services. The decision also compares on-reserve child welfare to the residential school systems, where the fate and future of many First Nations children is still being determined by the government. It recommends increasing funding and support to allow First Nations to deliver their own child welfare. Man, it never gets easier, does it? This has been going on again. This was first launched in 2007. After it's been going on for a very, 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 very long time. It is almost 20 years later. Today is the deadline. What is being done? Like, it's, man. I've got all these stories about this, and I don't even know where to go to talk to you, to tell you what is going to happen here. I have nothing stating about what took place today. It is 4:45 on December 22nd. And I don't know what happened. I'm trying to find some information because the deadline is today. Is the deadline at midnight? I don't know. Maybe did they take it to the 11th hour? It's all very frustrating. I hope that we can, in time, make amends for the wrongs that we have committed, right the wrongs. It's something that needs to be done. We cannot go about our lives pretending that everything is hunky-dory when we have committed terrible, terrible, terrible crimes, atrocities, underfunding. We've done harmful things to the Indigenous peoples of this country. And we need to make it right. And I mean it. We need to make it right. And I don't want to hear one single white person tell me, well, you know that. No, you shut up. Shut up. We took their land from them. I don't care if you say, well, that was several hundred. No. We did that. And then we forced them to live on reserves. Do you know that in Alberta, they were not allowed to leave the reserve on the weekends without a special pass? They couldn't vote in elections. It's not that long ago. I don't know the rules about what took place here in Ontario, and I apologize because I didn't have time to look it up. I know this because I learned this when I was at the Stampede. I sat in a teepee, And I had a gentleman explain to me what took place. They weren't allowed to leave the reserve. They had to stay there. They needed a special pass. And if they were outside of the hours, they were considered AWOL, if you will, and would be locked up. This is not that long ago. We did this to the people who had lived on this land for thousands of years. Now, I know some asshole somewhere is going to say, well, they came here from another place. Yeah, maybe, possibly, probably. But they'd been here for thousands of years. People who look like me have not been here for thousands of years. We are lucky we get to live here. I'll be back tomorrow with more on this story. Give you a few more insights and comments. And I hope you can join me. Between now and then, you take care. I promise I'll see you soon.